Hello, this is Frank Simon with the rest of the news, and we've got a special program for you with an attorney, Richard Porter.
I'm here.
And Corbin Seaver.
Yes, sir, I'm here.
And we're going to have somebody call in.
That's correct.
Ashish Joshi.
Yes.
Joshi.
Yes.
Is he on the line yet?
He's not on yet. He'll be calling in soon. He's up in the mountains right now taking a little vacation, so maybe we can just take the next minute or so just to explain to the audience what we're talking about.
Go ahead.
We're going to be talking generally about the issue of parental alienation. And, of course, our brother here, Mr. Porter, will be making his contribution and talking about the local family court system.
Here in Louisville.
Yes, and the importance of fathers staying involved in their child's life once they have divorced from their mother and things of that nature. And but as soon as that attorney calls in, he's basically a recognized legal expert in the whole issue of parental alienation.
Well, now, what does he do for a living?
Well, he's generally an attorney.
He's an attorney, like
yes.
Brother Porter.
Yes,
here.
like Mr. Porter specializes in, he does a lot of family court stuff.
Okay.
And one of his major specialties, I guess you might say, is parental alienation. Because many times when people get divorced, they have a child, the mother, it seems like a lot of times the mother automatically gets physical custody.
Yeah.
And so then the father, has to do what they can do to arrange, making sure that they're still involved in the child's life. And sometimes the mother takes advantage of that and sort of alienates the child from the father.
I see.
Now, of course, it can happen reverse as well.
Well, sometimes don't the fathers have visiting privileges?
Kentucky law always gives the fathers the right to visitation. It may have to be supervised sometime if there are issues that can't be addressed in normal visitation. Sometimes somebody else has to be there, maybe a therapist, to see how the dynamic is and to see how they relate to each other so there's no damage to the child, basically.
Okay.
But fathers are also, or any parent has the duty to pay child support as well.
Right.
So.
Doc, I think our
okay,
caller
good.
is in. So are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Great.
Oh, good. Thank you very much for joining us today. Right. And Corbin has already introduced you and told us about this. Do you have any thoughts about the importance of a father in?
Well,
or go ahead.
Doc, let me just ask this real quick, sir. I'm embarrassed to say this, but we really struggled on the pronunciation of your name. Could you give it to us, please?
Well, it's Ashish Joshi.
Okay, Ashish Joshi. Okay, great. And could you give us a little background on yourself, your education, and type of law that you generally practice?
I practice out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and my practice focuses on parental alienation litigation. I practice around the country and deal with these cases and internationally as well.
Wow.
And at the end of the day, parental alienation is an attempt made by one parent to sabotage the relationship between the child and the other parent without legitimate justification.
And so when you say without legitimate justification, what's the motivation of the parent doing that then?
Well, it could be several. There could be several reasons. Sometimes it's inadvertent. It doesn't have to be intentional. Parents are going through a nasty divorce, and while they are going through the turmoil of their emotions, they don't realize that they are treating the child as an ally in their divorce litigation. So there's an issue of boundary violation there. For example, a mother or a father could treat the child as an ally against the other parent and share inappropriate information concerning case, concerning adult information, and the child is caught in a loyalty bind there. Sometimes it's outright intentional, that because of whatever reasons, the hurt of the divorce or the rejection by the spouse, the rejected spouse decides to sabotage the relationship between the child and the other parent. And then it takes on a campaign of denigration, bad-mouthing, limiting the contact, interfering with parenting time, symbolic undercutting of the other parent, and all of it. But at the end of the day, what we need to understand, and the courts are understanding this, parental alienation is child psychological abuse. It's no different than a child being physically or sexually abused. There are studies out there which have shown that the effects of psychological abuse are very, very harmful and detrimental, both short-term and long-term. And it cannot be just, there can be an attitude that, well, the child can be resilient, we are going to get out of the woods after litigation ends, things are going to be hunky-dory, and there's going to be rainbow at the end of the sky over here.
Yeah. How common is that?
Unfortunately, it's more common than we would like it to be so. The courts have acknowledged the condition. Some courts call it pathological parenting. Some call it parental alienation. But there are decisions around the country which have acknowledged the seriousness of parental alienation. And the judges have tried to do several things. Some of them have changed custody outright, because if a parent cannot facilitate and nurture and encourage the relationship between the child and the other parent, that's a huge issue in terms of a custody evaluation and battle. So some judges have changed custody. Others have put financial sanctions, issued fines. Some of the judges have also sent the alienating parent to jail on occasions for repeated interference with parenting time, for repeated contempt of court or violating the court orders. And the judges have a pretty flexible and creative toolbox in terms of how to address parental alienation. And it also depends upon the age of the child, whether the alienation is mild, moderate, severe, whether the alienating behaviors are also mild, moderate, severe. So there's a lot of dynamic going on there.
Sir, before I just wanted to make a comment, and then have Mr. Porter say some things, because he's been involved with family court here in Louisville for well over 20 years. Is that correct?
Yes, 39 years.
39 years. So one thing I want to say is, based upon what you just said, and it's silenced everybody in this room, is that it doesn't sound good for the child. Period. I mean, this sounds like, as you put it, just flat out abuse. How does
Absolutely.
a child come through this, or do they?
It is child psychological abuse. There is no denying it. There are behaviors which have been found as psychological maltreatment by the American Professional Society on Abuse of Children, APSAC. And if you look at those behaviors, those very behaviors are mimicked by alienating parents. The problem is that our protective services workers, the social workers who are in the trenches to investigate cases of abuse, are not that educated in parental alienation. So a CPS worker, for example, who would not hesitate to remove a child from a home in case of physical or sexual abuse, will take his or her time in thinking about what's going on. Some judges who are not that well versed in this area will also take the time, kick the can down the road, order the parents to therapy, the child to therapy and whatnot. And it makes a case of parental alienation far, far worse, because therapy, traditional therapy, makes it far worse. And this is what many judges don't get. Fortunately, we are seeing really good decisions from courts around the country that have acknowledged the science behind what constitutes parental alienation. How do you combat that? How do you put in remedial measures in place? And more importantly, how do you contain those behaviors in the future?
Mr. Porter,
I might just interject here. The Kentucky law says that the family court judges have to give the fathers equal protection, as well as certainly what on an equal basis with the mothers. So there's no the judges have to honor that. We have 10 judges in Jefferson County here in Louisville which handle these family court matters, and they are all very good. I've worked there so long now. I hear from other attorneys that appear in the other courts, as well as my own experience. These judges are very good about giving fathers equal rights, so they're not mistreated, and it's always a critical balance, as Mr. Joshi has said, to protect the children. So it is very damaging to them. The courts have tended to favor mothers for placement of younger children simply because they appear to be better nurturers than the fathers, and that's not always true, of course. There are always exceptions. But they've tended to do that, and most of the psychological literature that's out there on proper parental custody issues favors women in those conditions or in those situations for younger children. But as the children get older, they obviously need their fathers. The studies have shown that as they get into the teenage years, the fathers are even more critical in the upbringing of the children. So it's essential, really, to provide as much parental attachment or supervision as possible for children, or they won't develop right. The society is so troubled as it is now because fathers are missing from so many homes. So we need to encourage fathers to participate, and I would, in our community, the fathers should not assume they're going to be mistreated because they're going to be given equal treatment. But our expert here is correct. Often the Child Protective Service social workers are not trained, and they tend to look down on men. So if a social worker is involved, you have to make sure they're not prejudiced against the fathers.
It's an interesting comment there because I've been through family court. I've known other guys who go through family court, and our impression was that, hey, these guys hate me. I mean, I'm not here to, say, hey, I'm having a Super Bowl party. I'm here to fight for time with my child, and there's a resentment that came up because, at least on my part and other guys I know, we had to spend a tremendous amount of money just to see our child, and there was nothing they could ever say about, there's no physical abuse or anything of that nature. That's why, I started learning more and studying more about parental alienation.
Well, now you say you had to spend a lot of money. What would you spend the money on?
The attorney fees. There'd be many of them. The lowest down payment I got was $1,500, and then I forgot what they called it, and then from there $150 an hour.
For an attorney to represent me in the hearings.
In court, yes.
That was probably a retainer that they asked for at
$1,500,
and then so much per hour after that.
Right.
These cases are very time-consuming because people like to use the courts as a weapon against the other party. One parent does that.
Help us, Lord.
I can't tolerate that. If I find that's going on, then I usually disengage from that client.
Yes.
But and I think our speaker said like a typical example, say a mother and father divorce, she gets custody of the children for whatever reason, and she remarries. So the man's mad as heck because some other guy's around his kids, so he's suddenly a victim. And then the mother's trying to cut the father off from the contact with these children because she's moved on with her life and's got a new husband. So the family certainly does need some counseling and some experts to help work that out. And that's good. And the judges here try to keep the children in counseling so that they've got an outlet or not damaged by the fighting of the parents. But if the fighting gets really bad, there's a case on record here in Kentucky, Mandelstam versus Mandelstam, and parents fought so much that the court gave the children to the rabbi.
Oh, my Lord.
So the courts took them away from the parents completely. Said, you're not fit. You all don't know how to act, and so we just won't let you be around the children anymore.
Right. Brother Joshi, did I pronounce that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Brother Joshi, why did you get involved in this whole issue of parental alienation? I mean, you're saying that's pretty much your focus. What motivated you to get in this?
Well, my mentor, Dr. Demosthenes Lorandos, and my former law partner, is a clinical psychologist and an attorney. And this was his area of expertise. He has written a lot about it. He has fought for fathers in the court, also for mothers at times who have been alienated. And more importantly, he has defended parents falsely accused of abuse, where the system was put into gear against them. Not just the family court system, but the criminal law system as well, CPS, police, prosecutors, everyone. It's important to understand three issues in terms of parental alienation and how it affects men in general. Number one, the research shows that 75% of parental alienation cases, women were the alienators. And in 25% of cases, men were the alienators. There's a significant amount of research for that. Second, the role that each parent takes in a marriage is often distorted when the divorce takes place. So, for example, a father who was a breadwinner and away from home and bringing the bacon to the table and all that, suddenly when the divorce is filed, that parent is portrayed as abusive, absent, never involved in the children's lives, and all of those things. So it's an uphill battle for the father to even show that I really care for my kids. And often allegations of abusive behaviors are thrown about without there being any finding of fact. There are allegations of domestic violence, which were never investigated. There were never any findings of fact made, but they just keep on, they become these ghosts that keep on coming up time and again. And many men are ordered to go to some sort of therapy, counseling, anger management, and whatnot, without there ever being a finding of fact. And finally, the most important, the fact of reaction is confused with causation. So when a parent, let's say a father who is being rejected by his children because of alienation, gets angry, gets frustrated, gets outraged at what's going on in the courts, in the home, in entire world is going down the drain, that reaction to alienation is often confused as causation. People point fingers at that and say, look, how angry he gets. If this is what he does in the courtroom and this is what he does outside of the house, imagine what's going on behind the closed doors. No wonder the kids are afraid of him. No wonder the kids don't want to see him. And it's very, very important to distinguish that the targeted parent is reacting to alienation. And many people react in a not optimal way. They're human after all. And it's a tremendous rejection when your own flesh and blood rejects you and calls you an incompetent parent, an abusive parent, an absent parent. That cannot be used as causation, but this is why your kids rejected you. Mm-hmm. People have to dig deeper than that.
Wow. Yeah. Not to change things a little bit, but from a spiritual standpoint, Mr. Porter and Dr. Simon, how are you seeing this? Because here's my concern, that I'm in a very strong men's group, and a lot of the men, when they talk about how they've come to faith and how they're trying to live a Christian life and all, they invariably will talk about the impact their father had on them, good or bad.
Yeah.
And so if they're, and I'm sitting there wondering, wow, this child is rejecting their father. I wonder how that might impact their spiritual life. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Mr. Porter.
Well, it's just so, divorce is just so destructive, and that's, of course, why Christ said you really need some kind of justification or just cause before you do that. So it's so destructive, and both parents are needed for the proper development of the child. And yes, there's scarring that goes on, and you probably never quite get over all that. So the children often blame themselves because the parents are divorcing. So that's why it's so destructive to their spirits. Children, anything that goes on in a child's life is a big event because it's probably the first time it happened. They don't understand it. They have no power in the relationship. The adults have all the power, so they need to be protected. And divorce doesn't protect them. It rips the children, it rips the adults. I found in my practice when I would handle a divorce case that the people associated me so much with the pain they were going through with the divorce, they didn't come back unless they were getting a second or third divorce. So it's very damaging to everybody involved. So yes, spiritually, it's a very, very terrible thing. And unfortunately, there's a lot of divorce going on in our society, a lot of breakdown, and people are not putting the Lord first in their lives, is what it probably amounts to.
Brother Joshi, you had mentioned the possible long-term negative impact on children. Have you seen situations where a child's been alienated, let's say from as an example, from their father, and they hadn't spoken to them for years and years and years, and then that child decides that now maybe young adult decides to reconnect with their parents? Do you have any success stories like that?
There is some anecdotal evidence on that. There's a significant body of research conducted by Dr. Amy Baker, who is in New York. And she wrote a book about this. I think it's called Ties That Bind, Adults, Children of Alienation. But I would like to go back to a point that was being discussed earlier about the importance of fathers in the children's lives.
Yes.
And there's extensive research conducted on this topic by doctors Richard Warshak and Michael Lamb. And they talked about children who were raised in the custody of mothers when fathers were cut out. And it showed how those children had significant shortcomings and had short-term and long-term negative effects when growing up in homes without the fathers. And this study has been shown repeatedly to courts. It was also recognized by the National Institute of Mental Health, where they show that the children who grew up without the fathers being in their lives, either the fathers were cut off by the courts, not allowed to see their children. Sometimes the fathers were in jail because of false allegations. But there's been a tremendous body of research to show that these kids suffer significant harm. And that research needs to be shown to the judges when the fathers are fighting for parenting time. And often people in these difficult circumstances just give up. It is extremely depressing, not to mention expensive battles to go back to court and keep on fighting to see your children for parenting time. And what's worse is that sometimes many judges take the easy way out and order supervised visitation. We have some allegations against you that you're an abusive man. Let's just take baby steps here. Why don't you see your kids in a supervised setting and we'll see how it goes? And that doesn't change thereafter. You go sessions after sessions after sessions, and nothing changes. You keep on paying the supervisor. They keep on making the logs. You see your children in some sort of a artificial jail-like setting where people are watching you interact with your kids. And it's a never-ending scenario. It's like living in this Groundhog Day reality. And it's amazing how it keeps on going on in courts around the country.
Dr. Simon?
Well, I wondered if Brother Joshi could give us some specific examples of what effect it has on the children if they don't have a father, if the father is, like you say, cut out of the relationship, what are some specific outcomes that might come from that?
I don't know off the top of my head. It's been time since I read this research. It was also known as the Texas Custody Research Project, which influenced custody legislation throughout the U.S. and played a key role in the shift from sole mother custody to shared custody and to children's greater access to both parents after divorce. But if I remember correctly, the study showed that the absence of father was directly tied to juvenile delinquency, their drug abuse down the line, sexual promiscuity, violent, aberrant behaviors, dropping out of schools, and all of that. It was particularly prominent in the black communities compared to other communities.
Yeah, let me follow up on that, and by sharing this story with you. I don't know if people are familiar with Kwesi Mfume. He's out of Baltimore, congressperson, and then later he was the head of the NAACP. He's a gentleman, before he became a congressperson, I think he had like 6-8 children out of wedlock, several different mothers. I met Kwesi Mfume, and if you ever met that guy, he's very charismatic, very good looking. I can understand why a lot of women were enamored with him. But Kwesi Mfume one time was interviewed by Larry Elder. And Larry Elder point blank asked him, he said, look, what do you think is the most critical problem facing the black community today? Kwesi did not hesitate. He said, fatherlessness. Boom, just like that. Now, he's a liberal. He's in Congress, head of the NAACP, liberal organization. You go talk to the Black Congressional Congress, and they're not going to answer that question that way. You go talk to the NAACP, they're not going to answer that question that way. But Kwesi had enough courage to say fatherlessness. And then he elaborated on that, saying some of the things that our speaker just said. And then when you speak to a lot of rap artists, even someone as highly successful like Jay-Z, he's a multimillionaire many times over. And when he was once interviewed by the Howard Stern show, it's not a very Christian host. Oops, did we lose him? We probably did, but we'll get him back. Jay-Z, during that interview, I was really impacted on how you could just almost see how Jay-Z was getting emotional about the time when his father stepped out of his life. It still bothered that man. He's highly successful. He's one of the. He's a very successful musician, one of the greatest rap artists ever. And yet, despite all that success, he still has that pain in his heart. And what is that pain? What is that hole in his heart? My father walked out on me. My father walked out on me. Think about that.
And the money didn't make up for it.
Then the money, the fame, the popularity, the power. The NFL called him in and wanted to help him, wanted his help on some stuff. But the things he can arrange, no. You're exactly right, Dr. Simon. That hole in his heart around his father had not healed despite all that.
I might add a couple of references were given there. There's one study that PhD doctor did, Louis Jablonski, and he's the one that recommended that boys, when they hit about age 13 or 14, should be in the custody of their fathers. I'm asked a lot by attorneys that do a lot of custody fights or issues. Are there any studies? And their eyes kind of glaze over, but I tell them it's Dr. Louis Jablonski. He's the one that recommends that because the boys really need their fathers as they enter those teenage years. And I'm not saying the girls don't, because our expert here said, they often go into sexual promiscuity. The girls do because they need reaffirmation from their fathers to know that they're really worthy as who they are, so that they're not looking for a father figure and get sexually abused in the process, because they seem to be looking for that man in their life.
Well, you were talking about looking at this from a spiritual point of view, and we all need love, and we need to love one another.
Yes.
And if we hate somebody or especially in your family or your spouse, and there's hate build up, well, it's very destructive. Now, of course, you might say I'm a small businessman, but I know that if there's bad feelings in our office or in our American family, so if there's bad feelings, it's very destructive. We're not going to accomplish our goals if we're not going to get along.
Absolutely.
Someone said that old-time religion makes me love everybody. Oh, man, we're out of time, aren't we?
Let me throw in our guest. His call dropped, but let me throw out his website address: JoshiAttorneys.com. JOSHI Attorneys.com. Really urge people to give him a call. Go to his website, check out his publications, his videos, things of that nature. Obviously, that guy is. I mean, he's an invaluable, source of information on this.
Yes,
it's a very important issue.
Very important. That's right.
Mr. Porter, do you want to say any final words?
Well, just the only other thing, some of the boys, if they, our girls too, if they don't have a father in the home, they're looking to their peer group a lot of times, and the peer group hasn't got enough sense or maturity usually to guide them in the right direction. So yes, the kids go into juvenile delinquency. So that's the importance of having the loving parents. And so if you can put aside the rancor and try to work to heal, make sure the children are protected in the process of a divorce, that's the best thing a parent can do for their children.
Yes.
I'm reminded of a scripture says, we're saved by grace through faith, not of ourselves, lest any man should boast.
Right.
And I mean, the idea is, if I can get forgiven, then I can forgive other people.
Thank you.
Is that right?
Sir. That's right.
We're all out of time. God bless you, Corbin Seaver and Richard Porter and
Thank you.
Joshi. Tune again next week for the rest of the news. Thank you.